Hey everyone, Tony here, and I cannot hide the fact that I'm so excited to tell you that we are back. It's been just over a year since we had to shut down our Sunday services because of COVID, and it is time, right? We're coming back, baby. April 4th, Easter Sunday, we're having our first service in over a year here at the meeting place. And as we get prepared to have an incredible Sunday morning, here's a couple things that we would love for you to have on your mind. One of them is safety, right? That we all do our part in the safety of others. We're going to be practicing and taking all the precautions that you're all used to right now. We'll be wearing masks and doing our part to social distance. Really, the biggest tension for us on that is our kids' environments, because we have fantastic rooms that are designed for your kids and the age that they're at. And while they're a whole ton of fun, there's not a whole ton of room back there. And so to remedy that, here's what you can do. You can pre-register yourself and your kiddos for Easter Sunday morning. Just head on over to tmpspokane.com, hit that Save Your Spot button, and just help our teams be prepared for you and anyone you're bringing with you so we can have an incredible Sunday morning. We're not going to always be RSVPing, but we're doing that right now so we can be best prepared for you and any guests that you bring along. I can't imagine a better Sunday to come back together than Easter Sunday. So you're invited. Come join us to experience and celebrate Easter with us here at the meeting place. I'll see you there.
Hi everyone, my name is Matt and I'm part of the team here at the meeting place. I just want to thank you for tuning in online, or if you're here with us on weekend on Wednesdays. We are continuing our series, Come and See. Last week was awesome and this week's going to be the same. So here's Pastor Tony.
Hey, welcome and thanks for tuning in with us today at the meeting place. Thanks to all of you that are with us here at our weekends on Wednesdays. I'm thrilled to have you with us as we continue this series that we started last week called Come and See. Now, if in your life, we're all in different phases and journeys and different ages even, but if you think back in your life, have you ever had to call the cops, or have you ever had to give an eyewitness account to the cops about something that had happened? I know for me, just a few years ago, I was standing out in front of my mom's house, and it was just about dark, and we're chatting. She's in her driveway. I'm right beside the road, and all of a sudden, I see a car coming up from behind me, and I turn and I look, and cars drive down the road. That's what they do. And this car comes in, and then without slowing down, it just whips into the driveway that's straight across the street from my mom's house, and it doesn't stop in the driveway. It just goes straight into the yard, and it stops. And then I quickly realized that there's another car approaching even faster from down the road, and it's coming straight in the same route, and then it goes straight through the driveway. The car that's now in the yard hits the gas and goes basically through the yard, breaks through the fence. The other car follows it completely back out on the road, and they speed off to nowhere. And while that was happening, about 4 or 5 people just pile out of the front door of the home and just kind of scatter, okay? I don't know what was going on, but in that moment, we did what a lot of us would do. We call the cops, and the dispatcher on the phone is asking us for all the details of what happened. She's asking about what color were the cars, what direction were they heading, who were the people that came out, what were they wearing, what age did they look, and all these different details about what we had seen and what we had experienced. And then the police officer shows up, and now the officer, because they didn't experience it for themselves, they also are asking these same questions. And so we're giving the eyewitness account of what happened as these cars came through, tore through a yard, broke through a fence, and sped off on their way, and these random people dispersed out of the house. It turned out no one lived in the house. They were squatting, and we don't know the details from there, but we had to give an eyewitness account of what happened. Eyewitness accounts are kind of a powerful thing, because you're looking at the eyewitness as a source of truth. They might not be able to hit on all the details. They might not remember everything. They might not have noticed all the things. But they're sharing with you the things that stood out the most, the things that were the most important with them. And so these eyewitness accounts and those scenarios like that are very, very valuable. Well, that's the same type of account we're getting when we open up Scripture to the Gospel of John. We're getting an eyewitness account of the gospel, which means good news. So it could be better said, the good news account of John. And that's what he's giving to us, because he was someone that was with Jesus, experienced life with Jesus. He was actually one of Jesus's best friends. I'm sure he started off like a lot of them. He was a disciple, but a handful of them grew closer and closer. And I have to think, based on what's written about him, that John may have been Jesus's best friend. And he gives us his own eyewitness account about the life and the happenings and the actions and the events of Jesus. But John lays out his document, the gospel, his good news account, kind of different than the other ones. And without getting into all the details of why some are written one way and others, but John, he kind of gives us this step-by-step process of looking at different signs that were used to convince him. See, he could have included a lot of things. He could have included a lot of other details. We talked about that a little bit last week, which if you missed it, you can go back and see it online. But there's so many things he could have included, but he said, hey, I want to share with you my eyewitness account, and I want to share with you the big things that stuck out to me as the most important things for you to be able to grasp and understand who Jesus was. And these specific signs, that John has 7 signs that help us understand who Jesus was, but really even more than just help us understand who Jesus was. These signs help us get to see a little bit of insight inside John's mind of these are the things that helped convince John that Jesus is who he said he was. That these are the things that led John to a faith and a belief that Jesus is Messiah, that Jesus is Lord. And so we're going to jump through these 7 signs over the next few weeks in this series, and I would encourage you to join us in the process and evaluate for yourself. Consider for yourself the claims of Jesus, and consider for yourself how you should respond to them, and if it's something worth putting your faith in and something worth following. And John thinks it is. I happen to think it is, but you're adults and you can decide for yourself. But let's look at the eyewitness account together and these signs together. So here's the very first sign that John brings up in the beginning of his document, the Gospel of John. The first sign was water into wine. Water into wine. Now, this is a really interesting sign. It's often referred to as a miracle, and what's fascinating about this one is if you have any church background, you've probably heard of this. But even if you don't, it's pretty likely that you've heard of this because it's such a weird encounter. It's such a weird miracle. Water into wine. Like the religious circles that I ran in as I started going to church in high school and then college and in my early years of ministry, like you weren't allowed to even drink alcohol. Like it was encouraged to abstain from it 100%. Some people believed it was grape juice in the Bible, so like what we have today isn't the same thing, so that's why they could drink it then, we can't drink it. Like all these different thoughts and opinions on these things, and yet Jesus' very first miracle is turning water into wine. I think that's really fascinating, especially because, again, the way I grew up was like that was a big no-no, the whole alcohol thing. But it's the first sign that he gives us. He doesn't really tell it to us like it's a miracle, and I think when you read it and when John wrote it down, he doesn't explain it as a miracle, quite possibly because he's already assuming that in the time that he's writing this, that everybody's already heard of this. So he's assuming that if you're reading his account, that you've already heard of this miracle. He doesn't have to fill you in on those details because you already know that there's a miracle of water into wine. Let's look at the way John tells his account, his eyewitness account of this story. It starts in John chapter 2. It says, on the 3rd day, a wedding took place in Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." Okay, sounds a lot like any mom. Okay, oh no, the wine's gone. What are we gonna do? The kids are in bed and there's no more wine. But so they're at a wedding in Cana, and Jesus is there, his mom's there, his disciples are there, and they notice that the wine has run out. Now we don't know exactly like the relationship that Jesus' mom had to the bride or to the groom, but we know she's there. We don't know the relationship that Jesus and the disciples had, but we know that they were there, and which means that when John is giving his account, he was one of the disciples of Jesus. So he's giving his eyewitness account that he was there, he experienced this, he actually saw what had happened. And so running out of wine in any culture at a wedding, like running out of food, running out of drink, like that's a big faux pas. That's a big underestimation of what you needed for your event or your whatever it would be. And so even in this first century Jewish culture, this is an insult almost to your guests to not be prepared for them. I mean, it was a big embarrassment socially in that setting, just like it would probably be somewhat embarrassing for us today. And so Mary, the mother of Jesus, she comes along and she's like, we have to solve this. We have to solve this. Jesus, where are you? And she looks to her son. She's always known there's something special about her son, right? And I gotta wonder, how many times has she gone to Jesus and said, hey, Jesus, could you do this? Could you, you've got, you know who you are, right, Jesus? Could you maybe? And so she looks to Jesus and said, they've ran out of wine. And his response to her is somewhat startling at first. It says this, it says, woman, why do you involve me? My hour has not yet come. Now, first of all, we have to understand that the way it reads in this text is this is not actually a disrespectful term, okay? So don't try this at home, teenagers. Don't go to your parents hey, could you come do the dishes? Woman, my time has not yet come. Why do you don't, that's not a good tactic to use against your parents. Don't do that. This term that Jesus is actually using here would actually be much more of an honoring term. He don't want to just say, Mom, why are you asking me? He says woman, which in other translations it literally would read dear woman. It's much more honoring than it reads in some of the text. And so, but he says to her, hey, don't involve me in this. I don't think, this is not how I plan to go public. This is not how I plan to start my ministry. I mean, Mom, this isn't very Messiah-ish of me, is it? Water into wine. I came to save the world. You want me to save the wedding? What's next, Mom? A bar mitzvah? And so Jesus is I don't really know. But then his mom knew, like moms do, and mom's yeah, he's going to take care of this. And this is what it says, his mother said to the servants, hey, just do whatever he tells you. He'll take care of it. Just listen to him. Do whatever he tells you. And when you read this story, you might think, what in the world? What kind of miraculous sign actually is this? It's so random. He didn't heal anybody. He didn't even really help anybody. So why this? And I wonder when it dawned on John, or maybe perhaps Jesus had to go back and explain it in detail later, but at some point John puts together the fact that this is actually the perfect way for Jesus to step into his role as Messiah. Now, the story goes on and it says this, now nearby stood six stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Let's just do the rough estimate here. 6 stone jars, 20 at the bare minimum, 20 gallons, 120 gallons of water these stone jars, these basins could hold. Now, these were specifically used for ceremonial washing. And so we can tell that this family that's hosting the wedding party, that they have some level of wealth and status because they have these jars. And you could tell that they also probably were good Jewish people that followed the laws of Moses, because in the first century, for the Jews that followed the law of Moses, the application would be at different times, Jewish people needed to go through different ceremonial washings to keep themselves clean, or to keep themselves ceremonial clean. And so it's very religious structure that's happening of these stone water jars for the cleansing and washing that they'd have to do before there's certain things to keep ceremonial clean. And so if you can imagine these are large stone jars. And here's what's significant about this. These things are like icons. These things are like status. These large stone jars represent everything about the covenant that God had made with Abraham and the people of Israel. All the traditions and the ceremonies and the religious upbringing, all these things were represented in jars like this. And the covenant that Jesus had actually, which we're going to find out as we go through this series, these traditions, this religion, these covenants that Jesus had actually come to replace. And these are the jars that he's going to work with and turn water into wine. And so this is brilliant. Jesus decides to go public using something that would soon be replaced to point to something that would soon take place. And God's covenant with Israel and the law of Moses, this was, even when that was instituted and that was put into place, that was way ahead of its time. In a very archaic and even barbaric times of world history, the law of Moses put into place and the covenant that's made, like these are actually an advancement for humanity to understand moral code and how to treat other people and taking care of each other. This was ahead of its time when it was given, but that time was now coming to an end, and Jesus was going to usher in something brand new. And these jars, they represented this entire sacrificial system, and Jesus decides to use this to illustrate something that nobody in the moment would even understand. So God's temporary arrangement, the means to an end of the Old Testament, the Old Covenant, the law of Moses, this temporary arrangement, it was disappearing, and something brand new had come because someone brand new was on the scene. And then the story continues. It says, Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." And so they filled them to the brim, 120 gallons at least. They filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so. And the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. Now again, John assumes that we already know the miracle of water into wine because everybody had already heard this story when John's writing this down. So Jesus says to fill up these empty jars, to fill them to the brim, and they did. They filled them with water just like they normally would, just as if they would normally be used. And then Jesus did something with them that had never been done before. The old passing away, and something brand new had come. And then he goes on, he says, this is what the master of the banquet says. He did not realize where it had come from. Though the servants who had drawn the water knew, I just picture them like bringing over a glass of this water, and they're like just curious as all can be of like, go ahead, taste it. Yeah, it's not clear anymore. Go ahead. Like they saw it when it was water, and now they're handing it to him red. And the master of the banquet tastes it, and they're like, it worked, it did it. Jesus did it. And the master of the banquet has no idea that this happened behind the scenes, but he's just blown away. This is what he says. He says. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." Side note here, if it's grape juice, then that doesn't make sense, right? If it's grape juice that's used, like what? Like you understand the concept, right? Like if you drink out, you bring out the cheap stuff at the end because they don't know the difference by then anyways, right? That's literally what it says. Everyone brings out the choice wine first and then the cheaper wine once the guests have had too much to drink. But it goes on, it says, "But you have saved the best till now." And check this out. God also saves the best for last, because the sacrificial system was what set the stage for this covenant and the people of Israel, but something new was coming. Just as the original wine set the table for this better wine to be brought out, in the same way, God established a covenant with the nation of Israel that would set up, as a means to an end, it would set up the world to expect something new, to expect something better. There's nothing really wrong in what was before. It was working to some degree, but what came before was only there as a means to an end to establish what was happening now. In other words, this was more than just a miracle. It was a sign, and it pointed them somewhere. It pointed to something, to someone that would change everything. And then John wraps up his story like this. He says, "What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples," look at this word, his disciples believed in him. The disciples decided to put their trust in him. They believed that he was the Messiah. And why did they believe it? Was it because Jesus said, "All right, guys, come gather around. Here, come into my living room, and here's how this is going to work. If one of you just believes, and then you go out and you can find 2 more people to believe just like you, and then those 2 find 2 more people to believe like you, then you can just see how this thing's going to become a movement. This is going to be cool." No, that's not what happened. That's multi-level marketing, okay? He didn't just say, you just need to believe, you just need to have more faith. Jesus didn't try to convince them of anything. What happens is they believed because of the evidence that they had seen. The reason they believed is because there was a reason to believe. They believed because of what they saw, and the sign that they saw, and they believed because of what it pointed to. I remember when I was like 9, 10 years old, and I was out at a buddy's house. It was like my one friend in the whole neighborhood that had one of those giant trampolines. Like those are everywhere now. Like every block has a couple trampolines on them. Like kids play with them like they're nothing. Back when I was a kid, it was special. Like you didn't have a lot of friends that had one. You had to sign a waiver, like a permission slip, and bring it over saying that you won't sue if you get hurt. Like it was a big deal to have a trampoline and be able to go jump on your buddy's trampoline. Well, this night, we're playing a game that we love to play where two people are on the trampoline and they're jumping, and then there's lines of people on both sides. And it's literally dodgeball where you're throwing across the trampoline. And so that night, I remember it. I've got the ball in my hand, and I wind up, and I throw the ball, and I hit a girl on the trampoline. And I'm so excited because I wasn't very good at throwing back then. Maybe I'm still not. But I hit her, and so if you hit them, you get to get on the trampoline. So I quickly run to the trampoline. I jump up, and I start jumping on the trampoline as she's trying to get off, and I'm jumping, and I bounce her off. And she goes to catch herself, and trying to catch herself, it's instantly like her arm's now all crooked. She broke her arm. And so we go inside, the parents call 911, a fire truck shows up, an ambulance comes, and they're pulling out their permission slip saying, we told her so, and what do? Well, I ended up, they're like, just go ahead and go home, we'll take care of it from here. And so I walk home, I happen to just live like down the block and around the corner, and I go inside my house, and my sisters are in there, and this was actually my sister's friend. And I tell both of them, I'm like, hey, you won't believe it, but your friend fell off the trampoline and broke her arm. They're like, no. Well, yeah, she did. She fell off. We were playing dodgeball like we always do. I jumped on. I think I bounced her off. It's probably my fault. But she fell, and her arm literally made an S. It was cool. And they're like, as a 9-year-old boy, that's pretty cool. But they're like, no way, that's not true. I'm like, no, believe me, it is, it really is. It didn't help the fact that this specific night happened to be April Fool's Day. And so their little brother comes home spouting off this, I'm trying to fool them, pull one over on them, but no, it happened. And I'm like, fine, don't believe me. I said, I'm gonna go outside, you come and see for yourself. You come in, go around the corner, you'll see the fire truck, you'll see the lights of the ambulance, come and see for yourself. There is something powerful about seeing the evidence for yourself that causes you to believe. Check this out. The disciples believed because of the evidence, and we are invited to do the same. The disciples believed because of the evidence, and we're invited to do the same. So from the very beginning, John establishes this thinking in his document, his gospel, and we find it all throughout it. He's not asking any one of us to blindly believe. He's laying out the evidence. He's saying this evidence, what I've seen, what I've heard, what I've experienced, it all points to someone and to something. And because of that, he's put his hope and his trust that he believes and has faith in the person of Jesus, that Jesus is who he says that he is. And he's saying, hey, from my experiences, it's my hope that when you read about these various signs, that you would come to the same conclusion that I have. Now, in our time of human history, it's really hard for us to believe based on what we saw. But we do have, John, I can't imagine that he ever pictured his document being read across the world 2,000 years. How could he even comprehend that, right? But what we have today in the recordings and the documentation of the Gospels, and so we can't necessarily form our beliefs based on what we saw. We didn't get to live shoulder to shoulder with Jesus, but what we do is we have the things that we've heard. And who better to hear from than an eyewitness account? Someone that's sharing with you what was most important to them. Out of all the details that happened, this is what they boiled down to. Said, these are the things that I really, really, really want you to know. John's like, you don't need to blindly believe. You don't need to just have faith. He says, take the evidence and do something with that. Let the evidence lead you to form your opinions. And you and I, all of us, we're invited to investigate the claims of Jesus. At the meeting place, we exist to be a safe place for people to find and follow Jesus. And we always invite you to consider the claims of Jesus and do that at your own pace. It's okay if some of us are moving faster through that than others. And some of us have faith that looks one way, and some of us have faith that looks another way. See, John came away from his experience with Jesus, and he's looking back at it all, and he's saying, this is the big deal here. Here's 7 signs that led me to believe in something that I'd be willing to give my life for. Here's 7 signs that led me to believe in something along with some of what came to be my best friends, and were willing to die for this because he died for this. And John saw a lot of different things in his final days. John would have seen plenty of bloodshed and heartbreak, possibly even the city of Jerusalem being destroyed and thousands of Jews being sold off into the Roman slave systems. And we know at this time when John's writing, we know that the Apostle Paul is dead. We know that the Apostle Peter is dead. It's likely that John's the last remaining alive disciple. And in spite of all of that, he continued to trust in Jesus, not because of just what he believed, but because of what he had experienced. Because of the evidence, because of what he saw, because of what he heard. And his conclusion that he comes to is that Jesus is the Messiah, that Jesus is the Son of God, that Jesus is Lord. John's basically saying, hey, I'm telling you what. I'm telling you all of this so you can see how my faith has been formed. And you might come to the same conclusion that God truly did make his dwelling among us, that Jesus was God in the flesh, that we have seen the glory of the one who came from the Father, and we've seen his grace and we've seen his truth. John could say, I was just a simple fisherman that I was invited to follow. And I had seen enough, and I'd heard enough, and I took it, okay. But throughout all of that, in those 3 years that followed, here's what was most important to me, because I think it was going to be helpful for you. And John actually tells us at the end of his book, towards the end of it, why he wrote all this down. We looked at this last week. We'll be looking at this throughout this series. He says, these are written down so that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing in him, you will have life by the power of his name. John says, hey, there's something that happened inside of me when I started to follow Jesus, that it's like I was alive, but it's like I came to life. There's something that happened inwardly and outwardly in me that just brought life through Jesus. And John would say, my prayer is that you, like me, would become fully alive as well. And my prayer, as Tony up here, my prayer is that before this series is over, as we investigate and navigate these signs, that you would believe that Jesus is the Messiah. Not because I'm asking you to believe, or not because I'm asking you to have blind faith, but because of the evidence that's been put before us, that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, that God came to dwell among us. But I don't want you just to blindly believe. I want you to come and see. Let's journey together through this. Let's learn from the eyewitness account of John and together form our faith. I want you to carefully consider the details, the evidence, the big deals, what was important to John, because quite possibly be important to you. And I would encourage you to come back next week for sign number 2 that John's going to lay out for us, because these are the things that can truly help shape and determine our faith. To not have a blind belief, but believing in the evidence that's been put before us and allowing Jesus through that to transform and change our life. Let me pray for you. God, as much as I would love to be able to go back and see for myself, I'm so grateful for Scripture. I'm so grateful for the ability to learn from the eyewitness accounts, from John, from the other disciples that wrote literature, from the ones that wrote it down, from the way it was collected, and that we can benefit from it even today, 2,000 years removed. But God, would you help lead us to take steps of faith based on the evidence that we saw? That where we don't get to see it in person, we get to visualize it through story, and we get to hear it through our ears, and we get to investigate it through human history and say, wow, this is credible and this is real. And if there is a man, Jesus, who really did come, and that's really God in the flesh with us, God, that you would enlighten us to that, and that we would respond. That we'd take that step of faith to say, God, I want to follow you. That would just be the first step of many steps in our followership of Jesus. Help us to do that. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. So now is the time where we talk about and think about our next steps. And as Tony was talking, I was just thinking about my next step, and to me, it's just getting back and even just reading the Gospel of John and thinking about Jesus and who he is and how he cared about this wedding that he was at, and he made wine. And just think about like how small of a thing that is. Like a wedding is important, but if that didn't happen, the wedding still would have happened. They probably still would have had a good time. But just think about the bigger stuff in our life that like Jesus does care about too. And for a guy who could care about the small stuff and the big stuff, the stuff that we love and care about, and even the tough times, I could get behind Jesus like that. And so I just encourage you to think about what your next step is and then go for it. And then also, if you guys consider TMP your home church, I just ask that you just go online and consider to give. We love to bring stuff online. We love to have people here. We're excited to get back on Sunday mornings. But with that money, we can continue to do that and just serve you guys and serve the community the best we can. So thank you so much for tuning in with us, or if you're here with us on Weekend on Wednesdays, and we'll see you guys next week.